Just when you thought shortages of worldwide food couldn't get any worse, rice may soon be a food staple that could be in short supply. And the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, FOA, stated recently that global rice production is releasing damaging greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. The UN says microbes that feed off decaying plant matter in rice fields are producing gas methane. Because rice is grown so prolifically, the amount created results in around 12% of annual global emissions. Rice does as much harm as 1,200 average-sized coal power stations. Since many third-world countries depend on the staple for much of their diet, if rice drops in supply, millions, if not billions of people could be adversely affected. The UN estimates that 795 million tons of rice were produced in 2019. China and India accounting for about half of that amount. The predominant method for growing the crop is to flood paddy fields and also on hillsides carefully terrace to maximize growing space. Flooding isn't strictly necessary to grow rice, but it's an efficient way of preventing the spread of invasive weeds. It's so fundamental for many rice farmers that most of them can't imagine growing it any other way. And that's where the trouble lurks. A main alternative to flooding rice fields involves fluctuating between wet and dry fields. So they drain a field, flood it to a shallow depth, and repeat it. But it's a technique that could throw up even more of a challenge, as increased levels of oxygen in the soil react to the nitrogen present to produce nitrous oxide, yet another greenhouse gas. Methane is more than 25 times more effective as a greenhouse gas than the headline-grabbing carbon dioxide, CO2. However, when methane gets to the atmosphere, it reacts with other chemicals in the air and breaks down after just a few years. Nitrous oxide is unique. It stays in the atmosphere for around 100 years, maybe 300 times more potent than CO2. All this represents a huge challenge for rice production. Too much water is encouraging the production of methane. Too little water is giving rise to nitrous oxide. Sustainability experts say in areas suffering droughts and water shortages, farmers will have to rethink growing their crops. Drought, according to the UN, has caused 49,000 people to be displaced in Somalia by the search for food and water. Climate change is named as the main culprit causing a large portion of drought and floods. And most experts say that current rice growing practices are a main contributor to greenhouse gases, ultimately allowing climate change to wreak havoc. As said earlier, rice is the staple food for over half the world's population. Rice provides up to 50% of the dietary caloric supply for millions living in poverty in Asia and is therefore critical for food security. It is becoming an important food staple in both Latin America and Africa. Rice, though, is a poor source of vitamins and minerals, but it's still important for use in government safety net programs that target those most in need. If current rice growing practices are more restrictive to fight climate change, its price is expected to drive up global price inflation as a result of a transition period. This means many poor people will not be able to afford rice and other more healthier foods. With all this happening, countries around the world are facing the biggest shortage of rice in 2 decades, according to CNBC, that cited a report by Fitch Solutions. According to their estimates, the 2022-23 crop year will see an 8.7 million ton shortage in the global supply of rice, the largest shortfall since 2003-04 when it was 18.6 million tons. China, the largest global rice producer, which supplied over 148 million metric tons of milled rice to the market in 2021-22, suffered from heavy rains and flooding in the second half of 2022, which affected much of the country's rice farmland. Currently, China is experiencing the highest level of drought in its rice-growing regions in over 2 decades. Both situations are worrisome for the vulnerable crop. With the already decline of wheat crop production globally, additional shortages in rice will not help either. Factor in new, greener agricultural techniques and regulations that are coming for rice production, billions of people could be intimately affected to maintain their lives in the next few years. This is H.A. Graves.